The Prime Minister said he pushed as far as he could, exempting prisoners convicted of rape, serious child sex and grooming offences from the early release scheme. But it's prompted probation staff to warn the government that it's failing to address a crisis in the system. It is probation officers who will be on the front line, dealing with thousands of newly released offenders. The union that represents them, NAPO, says despite a promise of £700 million in investment, it cannot guarantee public protection. It says the potential release of thousands of perpetrators of domestic violence who will be eligible for the scheme means that more people, largely women, are likely to be hurt or even killed. Several victims of sexual and domestic abuse have told this programme over the last few weeks of their fears that the person who harmed them may do so again.
I feel upset. I feel like we've been disregarded. I feel like we've been pushed to one side. What's happened to us and what we've had to go through has not been reflected in anything to do with the law. We've suffered a lot. Me personally, I've dealt with a lot of trauma.
The Prime Minister, aware of the outcry, says that offenders who are let out early will be tagged and subject to tough supervision, including restriction on movement. But is that system up to the job? And what choice really did the government have? It says the prison system would have completely run out of space within months, with little room left for newly sentenced offenders. Successive governments have reached for these early release schemes. It has been a quick way to free up capacity until more prison places are built. But at what cost to victims? And to the strained probation service, soon to be responsible for thousands more prisoners who would previously have been in jail. Well, joining me now are Gavin Lee, a former probation manager who left his job in May after 3 decades and is speaking publicly for the first time, and the Rotherham MP Sarah Champion, who's written to the Minister for Probation today expressing her concerns about the state of the service. Gavin, you only left the probation service a few months ago. Right. In one word, how would you sum up the state of it?
Very shaky.
Shaky?
Risks are significant, faced by the public, victims, children and families, also risks for and to probation staff. Under-resourced, with very little national voice, unfortunately, to explain why probation is so key across the system, working with victims, some victims as well as perpetrators.
That's a lot of words, but we get the idea. So given all that then, I mean, the government seems to be asking the probation service to bail out the prison service at the minute and going to send thousands more prisoners their way. Will they be able to cope?
Well, no, because the vacancy rate across England and Wales in probation is about 24%. If you factor in sickness absence levels, if you factor in staff morale, which is low, I know a lot of probation staff who have left, very experienced, or are planning to leave. Staff retention isn't very good. And the job is very difficult. Most of the public and probably your viewers don't understand what's involved. But probation works in the courts, in the prisons, in hostels, in the community, working alongside the police. But we are quite hamstrung by being civil servants.
But just before we go to Sarah, just spell out what it means if the probation service cannot cope when suddenly we're going to have thousands more, say, domestic abusers on the streets.
OK, so we don't always know where people are when they're released, because some are released homeless, 8,000 last year. And then they should be coming in regularly, at least once a week, sometimes more than that. But then how quickly might we recall based on the fact that we've had no contact for a few days or a week? And I think you know, and your viewers might know, that recently the figures indicate that more people were recalled in the first 3 months of this year than were sent to prison.
So you don't even know always where these people are?
Well, not always, no. Unfortunately.
Sarah Champion, you welcomed some of the exclusions that the Prime Minister brought in, but that still leaves some really dangerous people getting out early. Do you think the probation service is in a state to protect the public from them?
Well, first of all, can I pay tribute to the victims and survivors, including Molly, who was on your programme, and some of the other ones local to me, who, because of them, got those exclusions. And I'm really glad that the Prime Minister listened to them and genuinely tried to put as much protection in place as he could. But as you've heard from Gavin, I mean, we've gone from what was an absolutely world-class service to, I think it was 2014, the Conservative government brought in an act which privatised probation. It then had to be renationalised because it wasn't working at all. And to be quite honest, the system's been hollowed out. So I really welcome that the ministers are saying now that they're going to put 700 million into rebuilding probation, but that's not going to happen by October. And the probation service is amazing. It is a superb safeguarding system for us. But as Gavin's just said, it's just not resourced for what's coming in October.
And yeah, the government's promising 1,300 more probation officers, but they're not going to turn up overnight, are they? And the prisoners are going to be let out in a couple of months. So what's going to happen in a few months' time?
Well, even if those 1,300 did turn up overnight, it's estimated it's sort of 27 months before they're specialists enough to deal with the more complex cases, which a lot of these people, like a domestic violence offender, is. So, yeah, we have a real problem. Adding on to that is the fact that the NAO recently did an audit and said the tagging systems, only 62% of those that they covered were actually working efficiently. So we've then got the police who are going to have to be monitoring offenders. Gavin's just said if people come out and they're homeless, you don't even know where they are.
Yeah.
So I have deep sympathy for the government who's trying their best, but it's a horrible situation we're in.
Yeah, it is a horrible situation because you know as well as everyone that if something didn't happen, if we left things as they were, the prisons would overflow and there would be nowhere to send prisoners who are convicted. So what can you do other than what the government has done? Do you have an alternative up your sleeve?
Well, sadly, I don't. I wish I did. I mean, long term, yes, of course, we ought to be focusing on prevention, on early intervention, on rehabilitation. But we're talking, 8 weeks away now. So, I mean, what concerns me most is that it is going to be left to the probation workers and the police to try and enforce this. So the government needs to give them whatever resources they need.
Sorry to cut in. Gavin, just in a word, are people safe right now? They're going to be safe when more of these prisoners come out?
Not sufficiently, no.
No.
And I think, if tags could be fitted before release, if all prisoners were released with a phone, an address and a GP, that would be a starting point.
And just finally, very briefly, we've heard warnings about women being particularly at risk, being killed because of these changes.
Yeah. Well, domestic abuse is unfortunately very prevalent, and most domestic abuse incidents do not lead to convictions, but the history is there, and we know that there are many victims and survivors who've not had justice. I mean, we should mention the court backlog, which is years in
It's plenty more to say, Gavin.
Indeed.
And Sarah Champion, thank you so much, but we have to leave it there. And tonight, the Ministry of Justice told us its £700 million investment in probation and community punishment was ensuring that staff have the resources, powers and technology they need to manage offenders safely in the community. It said it had exceeded its recruitment target for trainee probation officers, making sure the service had the resource it needs to keep dangerous offenders under closer surveillance than ever before. Matt.